Welcome back. It's good to see you again. You might remember the last time we talked, I shared with you about Shurley English and pattern 1. Pattern 1, subject, noun, verb. Now, before we get into patterns 2 and 3 today, I want to talk to you about verbs. Verbs can be action verbs or they can be linking verbs. And in Shurley English, we deal with action verbs in patterns 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7. And we deal with linking verbs in patterns 4 and 5. So I just want to talk to you about the difference between an intransitive action verb and a transitive action verb. In pattern 1, our subject is doing the action, and that is called an intransitive verb because the subject does the action. But as we get ready to move into patterns 2 and 3, we're going to find that the subject does the action to someone or something else. So let's see how that's going to work. Pattern 2 is called subject noun, transitive verb, direct object. And when we shortcut the pattern words, when we label it, we write SN subject noun, V-T verb transitive, DO direct object. And so we usually say subject noun, verb transitive, direct object. So let's see how pattern 2 works. You might remember the first question to always ask is who or what. So let's read the first sentence and see how that sounds. George bought a new car. So George is a person. We're going to ask, who bought a new car? And the action or answer is George. George is the subject noun. You might remember then the second question is always, what is being said about the subject? So we ask, what is being said about George? And the answer in this sentence is George bought, verb. Now, in pattern 2, there is one more sentence to always ask. George bought what? And if we can answer that question, we know that we have a direct object. And that makes it pattern 2. So let's take a look. George bought what? George bought car. Car is the direct object, which makes the verb a transitive verb, and we mark it VT. Now let's go back and fill in the other words. What kind of car? New. Adjective. A, article adjective. We check, is everything marked? George bought a new car. We see our pattern. Our pattern is subject noun, verb transitive, direct object, pattern 2. Now we're going to check, is everything marked? Yes. Period, statement, declarative sentence. Go back to the verb. Is there an adverb exception? Is there an adverb right in front of the verb? No. Slash to separate subject from predicate. And there we have a basic pattern 2 sentence. Now let me talk about A for a minute. A, the, an. Those 3 small words are adjectives, but they're a special group of adjective called articles. And anytime you see a, the, or an, you know there's a noun, a naming word, very close by. There may be some adjectives in the middle, but you're going to find a noun nearby. And so we label a, an, and the, very simply, article adjective. Now, you remember I said that the patterns are like bones of a skeleton. So let's see what happens if we put a little meat on the bones. I'm going to take the same basic sentence and add a few things to it. Let's begin. George bought a beautiful red convertible for his wife yesterday. The first question, who bought a beautiful red convertible for his wife yesterday? George. Subject noun. What is being said about George? George bought. Verb. George bought what? Convertible. Convertible direct object, bought, transitive verb. There we have our basic pattern. Now let's see how we put some meat on the bones. For, preposition. For whom? Wife, object of a preposition. Whose wife? This is a special kind of an adjective called a possessive pronoun adjective. And we learned that in maybe second or third grade, so no worries there. George bought a beautiful red convertible. When? When? Yesterday. Adverb. So we go out to the end of the sentence after we find the pattern, we finish it out. Now let's come back in. Red. What kind of convertible? Red. Adjective. What kind of red convertible? Beautiful. Adjective. A, article adjective. We have everything marked. Now let's find our pattern. Subject noun. Verb transitive. Direct object. Pattern 2. Check. Is everything marked? And we go through and yes, indeed, everything is marked. Period. Statement. Declarative sentence. Go back to the verb. Is there an adverb exception? No. Slash to separate subject from predicate. So in pattern 2, the subject is doing an action to another person or place or thing. Now, do you see this? This is going to lead us into pattern 3. Let's take a look. In pattern 3, we have the subject noun, the transitive verb. Oh, we added an indirect object. And then we have our direct object. Notice our abbreviations. Subject noun, verb transitive, indirect object, direct object. Now, this first sentence, is a pattern 3 sentence. In parentheses, I showed you the same sentence in pattern 2, and look what happens. In pattern 2, I have a prepositional phrase, but if I wanted to say the very same thing in a different way, I could use pattern 3. Instead of saying for me, change the prepositional phrase to an indirect object, me, and stick it in between the verb and the direct object. So let's see how this sounds. It's going to be the very same thing we did with pattern 2. Grandfather built me a birdhouse. Grandfather is a who. Who built me a birdhouse? Grandfather, subject noun. I'll do both of these at the same time. What is being said about grandfather? Grandfather built, verb. Grandfather built what? Birdhouse. Is birdhouse the same as grandfather? No, of course not. Birdhouse then is the direct object, which means the verb is a transitive verb. Now, if I were to continue with the pattern 2 sentence, I would say for preposition, me, object of a preposition, I'd have A as my article adjective, declarative sentence, come back and fill in, okay? But I'm not going to do that. That's pattern 2, okay? We're going to move to pattern 3. Grandfather built what? Birdhouse, direct object. For whom? It becomes the fourth question. For whom? Me. And then A is an article adjective. Easy peasy. Let's go ahead and mark our pattern. Subject noun, verb transitive, indirect object, direct object, pattern 3, check. Is everything marked? Yes. Period, statement, declarative sentence. Go back to the verb. Is there an adverb exception? No. Slash to separate subject from predicate. Let's try one more. We are going to put a little bit more meat on the bones. You're going to notice I'm going to start with a prepositional phrase, and that gets us into something that we learn in maybe third or fourth grade. Inverted word order instead of natural word order. But you'll notice some of the very same words we started with. And the questions all start the same. So let's read the sentence. During the summer, my grandfather built me an elaborate birdhouse. The first question, who built me an elaborate birdhouse? Grandfather, subject, noun. What is being said about grandfather? Grandfather built. Verb. Grandfather built what? Birdhouse. Direct object, transitive verb. Grandfather built birdhouse for whom? Me, indirect object. And there you see the basic pattern 3 with some meat on the bones. Let's come back and finish it. What kind of birdhouse? Elaborate, adjective. An, article, adjective. Whose grandfather? My, possessive pronoun adjective. That's a special kind of adjective that you'll learn in grade 3 or 4. During, preposition. During what? Summer, object of a preposition. The, article, adjective. And we will learn that whenever we start a sentence with a preposition, this is part of the predicate. So now we're in inverted word order, and we're going to have to separate the subject from the predicate and do some underlining. So let's finish this out. Subject noun, verb transitive, indirect object, direct object, pattern 3, check. We come all the way through and read period, statement, declarative sentence. Go back to the verb. I'm going to put the slash at the end of the other line here. Now, what is the subject? My grandfather. What is the predicate? Built me an elaborate birdhouse, and also this prepositional phrase has been moved. It could have been at the end, but it was moved to the front. We've switched the order, the natural order of the sentence. This is part of the predicate. It tells when he built, and so that's inverted word order. So patterns 2 and 3 use action verbs, but they use transitive action verbs that carry the action from the subject to the direct object. In the next 2 patterns, next time, we're going to talk about a different kind of verb called a linking verb. It was good to see you. See you next time.